Dee Dee Blanchard cared for her daughter, Gypsy Rose, deeply. They'd been through a lot together. Gypsy's father, Rod Blanchard, had already separated from the 24-year-old Dee Dee Blanchard before Gypsy's birth, as he was only 17. Raising her young daughter as a single mother, Dee Dee relied on the help of her parents and lived with them as well. She had originally moved in to help out with her alien stepmother, but after a few minor arrests for financial fraud had stuck around longer than intended. When Gypsy was around 8 years old, she fell off her grandmother's motorcycle and hurt her knee. This was the beginning of a downward spiral in Gypsy's health that would culminate in the girl becoming wheelchair-bound, losing all of her hair and teeth, getting her salivary glands removed, and needing a feeding tube. Dee Dee struggled to support them after her parents started to question Gypsy Rose's condition, and she had her and her daughter move out of their home. It was hard to hold down a job and to see Gypsy getting the proper treatment 24/7 and administer all of her necessary medications. Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose lived off disability checks and child support in a rundown apartment in New Orleans until Hurricane Katrina forced them to relocate to Missouri in 2005. By this time, Gypsy Rose was being treated for an undiagnosed chromosomal disorder, muscular dystrophy, hearing and visual problems, epilepsy and leukemia. Her and her mother's tireless efforts to make sure Gypsy had a full and happy life despite her disabilities inspired many. Organizations and specialists flocked to help out the girl. They were drawn to Dee Dee and Gypsy's positive spirit and close bond in the face of adversity. A podiatrist neurologist named Bernardo Flasterstein offered his services. At the appointment, he noticed something quite odd on Gypsy's charts. He found that there were no discernible medical reason why Gypsy Rose couldn't walk. She didn't have muscular dystrophy. Dee Dee explained this away by stating all of Gypsy's medical records had washed away in the hurricane. Flasterstein made some calls. He was able to contact some of Gypsy Rose's former doctors in New Orleans, whose records had survived the flood. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was a perfectly healthy child. She just had a bit of a lazy eye, and that was all. Dee Dee was outraged at the accusation, and she moved her healthcare from their home in Springfield, Missouri, to 3 hours away in Kansas City, Missouri, to avoid suspicion. It was Dee Dee who was sick. Dee Dee is suspected to have suffered from Munchausen's by proxy. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a behavioral disorder where a child's caregiver gives the gain attention by exaggerating their child's illness or injury. One night in 2010, there was a knock on Alea Woodmason's, Gypsy's neighbour's door. It was Gypsy Rose, and she needed to be taken to the hospital. Gypsy knew she could eat normally and walk. She too had begun to suspect she wasn't ill like her mother had said. The two teenage girls had been close growing up, and Alea saw Gypsy as almost a little sister. Gypsy wanted to see a romantic interest she'd met online and needed Alea's help to get him. Gypsy Rose had started talking to men on Facebook in hopes they would lead to her rescue from her mother's power over her. She'd been inspired by seeing how women interact with friends and men while attending sci-fi conventions with her mother and wondering why she couldn't have the same relationships. When Leah and Gypsy got to the hospital, Gypsy showed documentation that she was born on July the 1st, 1991, proving she was 19, therefore legally of age to visit her prospective boyfriend. Soon after, Dee Dee found Gypsy at the hospital. Dee Dee showed professionals an alternate doctored birth certificate that stated Gypsy was only 14, that was issued after Katrina. This, Dee Dee was legally allowed to take her daughter home and thwarted Gypsy's escape. Dee Dee liked to wash away discrepancies in her story about her daughter by telling people it was the medication that messed up Gypsy's thinking, or that Gypsy Rose had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. By adjusting Gypsy's age, Dee Dee could ensure the government assistance would continue as much of the money was seized once Gypsy reached adulthood. After Dee Dee dragged Gypsy Rose back home, she chained her to her bed. Dee Dee smashed Gypsy's laptop and phone with a hammer and threatened she'd smash Gypsy's hands if Gypsy ever tried to use chat rooms to cruise for men and run away again. Gypsy Rose merely waited until Dee Dee would go to bed and continued her online search for a saviour. She was well rehearsed in the timing of keeping secrets from her mother, as Gypsy had secretly been practicing walking in her room after bedtime for a while. After this incident, things began to physically escalate in the amount of control Dee Dee required over Gypsy Rose. Sometimes Dee Dee would deny Gypsy food for a day or two, or physically strike her with a coat hanger during the more and more frequent arguments the two shared. Finally, after 2 years of searching for a way out of Dee Dee's clutches, in 2012, Gypsy Rose met 23-year-old Nicholas on ChristianDatingForFree.com. Nicholas had a record that included one being arrested for masturbating in McDonald's bathroom for 9 hours in Wisconsin. He said he had an itch and was just scratching. The two lovebirds quickly progressed into a virtual room escapism, consenting to a relationship of BDSM and daddy roleplay kinks. Gypsy soon found out that Nicholas had multiple personalities, many of them violent, including the belief he was a 500-year-old vampire named Victor. They also acted as each other's confidants, and Nicholas urged Gypsy to report her mother's abuse. Gypsy had never gone against her mother's wishes, as she was too scared of the consequences. Wherever Gypsy spoke, her mother would hold her hand and squeeze it if she disapproved, and this included when they were around doctors. Dee Dee was always holding Gypsy's hand. Nicholas and Gypsy Rose kept in touch secretly for 2.5 years over Facebook Messenger. They finally figured out a nondescript way to trick her mother into their fateful meeting in person. In 2015, Nicholas, under the guise of a stranger, sat next to Gypsy Rose while she and her mother attended a screening of Cinderella. The couple snuck off together. Gypsy Rose wasn't physically attracted to Nicholas in his physical form, but had sex with him anyway. In the men's bathroom, no less, Dee Dee disapproved of the relationship in jealousy. Knowing the negative consequences that would come for Gypsy Rose's rebellion, the two decided to engage Plan B of Gypsy's escape: murder her mother. In June 2015, Gypsy let Nicholas into her home after Dee Dee had gone to sleep. Gypsy handed Nicholas some latex gloves and a knife. She hid in the bathroom as he stabbed her mother to death. Nicholas wanted to rape Dee Dee, but Gypsy talked him out of it. The pair stole $4,000 and made their way to Big Bend, Wisconsin, where Nicholas lived with his parents, to lay low until things blew over. A couple of days later, Gypsy began to worry that no one would find her mother, so she had Nicholas post 2 messages on Facebook to alert authorities. With authorities alerted and the body found, a search began for the kidnapped Gypsy Rose. They were looking for a mentally handicapped bald invalid and were shocked when they found Gypsy Rose eating, walking, and fully independent. Nicholas and Gypsy Rose Blanchard were arrested and taken to trial. Nicholas was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, despite his attorney's arguments that his autism spectrum and mental capabilities made it impossible for him to premeditate the morality of killing Gypsy's mother. Gypsy Rose, whose family say she is thriving now, was sentenced to second-degree murder with a punishment of only 10 years in jail due to the abuse she suffered. She will be eligible for parole in 2024.